The Hidden History of the Human Race, Part 3. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent Podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents to Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And as you probably can hear, I'm sick, and Kyle's also sick. We went on a trip to the Canyonlands, and it was a Contact at the Cabin event with Dave Matheson and Grimerica and Brandon Powell, but we went early and met up with Brad in Kanab in Utah.
Yeah, that's right.
And did some exploring with him for about a day and a half. And that was really cool. We went to, what was the Coral Dunes? It was like a valley in the midst of, it's kind of deserty, but there's plenty of trees and everything. But then there's this valley where it looks like the Sahara.
Yeah.
It was gigantic sand dunes made out of
Sand.
Yeah. That I guess the color is coral. It's sort of a pinkish orange.
Salmon sand dunes.
Salmon sand dunes. Yeah. And they're huge. Took some pictures. They are surprisingly gigantic. And it's, I don't know, it was interesting. And then, about an hour from there, we went driving up into Duck Creek Village, which is where the event was held. So from like dunes of the desert up into that area where it was almost at 10,000 feet elevation, and there's like a frozen lake and snow everywhere.
And really tall trees.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And lava fields.
Yeah.
Random lava fields
that was
spread
crazy.
out, and, where it was there was still so much rubble from the lava that there were no trees at all, just nothing growing, because it was just all lava rock. And then we went down. We decided we wanted to go look at dinosaur footprints. This is a thing that Kyle and I love. If we find out there are dinosaur footprints anywhere nearby, we have to go.
Must go see.
That's right. So it was cool. We had to do some kind of off-roading, but fortunately, our buddy Daniel, who you guys have heard him play bass on many of the bumper songs we use in the show, Daniel went with us, and he brought his truck, which is great for off-roading.
Yeah.
It's lifted, got
Toyota Tundra,
got lifted. It's lifted and got aggressive tires and four-wheel drive. So we had to drive, what was it, like a mile and a half down that?
Yeah, something like that.
And it was real sandy through valleys and stuff. And I mean, without four-wheel drive, we would have gotten stuck. But we made it, and then the area that we were walking through to look for the footprints was sort of a canyon, but it was ancient sand dunes that had lithified.
Yeah.
Or at least that's geologically the explanation for the way that the layers looked. It's hard to describe.
Also known as sandstone.
Yeah. Not all sandstone is like that, though.
No. But yeah, it has the striations in it that are indicative of windblown sand.
Yeah.
So they say.
Right.
Which, I mean, it looks like that to me when I look at, like we were looking at the dunes that were broken away at the beach.
The watcher says it was like a Dali painting, surrealist sand rock.
Yeah. But yeah, you could see it'd all be sloped in one direction, and then there would be this defining line, and it was all sloped the other direction.
Yeah.
Above that. But the way it would erode made it very beautiful, because you'd have these waving lines going across the surface from the slightly different colored sand.
Yeah, that's right.
It was just beautiful. Just really.
Yeah, and
really
it was
awesome.
all smooth curves for the most part, right? It was like, it looked wind eroded because everything was very rounded, and there weren't any sharp cuts like water would make if it was eroding it. Now I'm sure water has done some of the eroding, but I don't know. It was just very interesting, and there were footprints there. We did eventually find them. They weren't easy to find.
They were like splashed, like they were running in like
wet sand.
Yeah, like beach, like the wave had just rolled up and rolled away, and then you go running along. It's like this sloshed sort of
Yeah.
sloppy sand.
And so it turned out that you always had to the prints would follow like a ridge line like you would never see them cross layers. And that became obvious. You're like, okay, because each layer was actually a surface. So
Right,
the prints can't cross the layers, right? Because that would mean they were running on different surfaces at different times, which is impossible. So to find the prints and the tracks, and we found several there were 5 or 6 or 7 prints in a row. They would always follow the lines of the strata, and instead of being imprinted, they were actually extruded. And we worked that out. Brad was there with us, and we were talking about it. And it's like so the idea that we came to, and I don't know if this is right, but it sounds right, is that these things were running along on sand, and their footprints compressed the sand where they stepped, and that made the sand in that particular area more tightly compressed than it was placed there by the wind. And then when it lithified, became stone, that area where they had stepped was now more tightly packed. A little bit harder. And so then when it eroded away, that area didn't erode as much as the surrounding area. And so they actually stuck up out of the layer.
Yeah. Strange.
Yeah. Very interesting. They were like reverse prints. So that was cool. And then, of course, the event itself, we went up to Duck Creek Village, and we had a bunch of cabins and the main lodge there. And Dave did his talks. He did at least one a day on the stars, and then we did go out into the high desert at a Bryce Canyon overlook starting around 10 o'clock. Or no, I guess it was earlier than that.
Yeah, sunset was at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it was after 9.
9, and then until around midnight we were there, I guess. Maybe 11 or midnight, and actually looked at the stars. And it was funny because Dave was like, God, there's so many stars. He's trying to find the ones he wants to talk about, but there were so many up there that it was confusing him sometimes. But it was great. He was pointing them out. He had a laser that was like a freaking lightsaber, this giant purple laser, and telling the stories of the myths and showing how to find the stars and the different constellations. And it was really cool. And then, of course, we did a bunch of hiking in Bryce and Zion Canyon. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and in the mornings, Brandon Powell would do the breath work. We got to jam with him.
Yep, that's right.
That was cool.
That's right.
He does this it's like his guided exercise. It's definitely an exercise, a breathing exercise, and he's sort of like it's not rapping. Exactly, but it's like he's got this cadence to the way he's talking.
A bit of a chant, sort of.
Yeah. And playing the drum, just got the drum beat going. Everybody's like doing the breath work, and it helps you get energized and helps you acclimate to the high elevation.
Yeah.
And it gets your body prepped for a day of hiking for sure. Yeah, and can give you some interesting high feelings.
Yeah, and visuals. People were getting visuals. Yeah, that was fun. And then we did we got in the Virgin River.
Oh yeah,
did a dip in the cold water.
Polar dip.
Yeah. Oh man, that was cold. Yeah. Not everybody did, but a lot of us did. Most of the hosts did, and quite a few of the attendees did as well. So Brandon was proud, I think.
But all in all, it was just it was an awesome trip. It was a lot of fun, great group, and great leadership with having Dave there. He had a very extensive itinerary lined out. He knew where everything was and all the parking areas and all this stuff. And, he runs a tight ship, folks. It was great.
Yeah.
And of course, Keith and Gage were there, the cooks, slanging out breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
That's right.
And it was awesome. They brought this giant wok to the canyon out there with all this stir fry and cooked on site, and it was amazing.
Yeah, they called it a walk in the park.
That's right. Yep, they almost blew up the propane tank in the process.
That's right. Somebody was like, the hose is on fire. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the way back, we drove through part of the Grand Canyon, which was cool.
Yeah, we went down, was it 89A? I think is the name of the highway, and I'm trying to do my Brad impression.
Yeah, you're not doing it right.
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it goes across Marble Canyon, which is in the northeastern side of the Grand Canyon. Of course, the North Rim or whatever was closed at the time because of ice. So we couldn't go down. We couldn't go down in and check that out. But that drive was amazing.
Yeah.
You go along the edge, of this, like I said, the northeast area where the canyon begins to form, and at some point you drop down in and drive along the bottom of that canyon and go all the way, I think, up to the most northeastern end of Marble Canyon, and then cross that canyon, which is inside the canyon. So Marble Canyon itself is like a secondary canyon.
Yep.
Inside the macro canyon, which is just, it's just
the scale is impossible to describe.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was beautiful. The Colorado River down in there.
Yeah, and
I don't know how far down it was. The bridge, there was a suspension bridge going over it,
and then a people bridge, like a tourist.
Yeah,
bridge.
the old bridge. The old bridge is now turned into like walking bridge, and you can walk out over.
What was it called?
Colorado.
Navajo. It was called Navajo Bridge or something like that.
Maybe
there was a name for it. Yeah,
can't remember.
But we parked in a little.
Yeah, Navajo Bridge.
Yeah, there's a little area. We were able to walk out over the old bridge and look down. It's
built in 1929.
Yeah, that canyon. That the river is in now, which is like a secondary entrenchment of the Colorado, is huge and massive and deep, but the Colorado clearly fits it.
Yeah.
But the wider canyon around it is just, the scale is unbelievably enormous. So you're standing there over the bridge looking down at the Colorado in a huge canyon that it's made for itself, but you're standing in something that's, I don't know, several orders of magnitude larger.
Yeah. Yep. Fantastic drive, and then you get out of there, and keep going east, and you get into the flatlands.
That's right,
and it's just flat.
Yep. Yeah, and then we got home, and I got sick almost immediately. I went to work one day and got home, and then that night I had a fever, and I kept a fever for 3 days, and developed a bad chest congestion, which I still have some of. Kyle got allergies or something, and so we didn't even record a show. We weren't able to record a show that week at all. So that's why we took a week off.
Stuffed up since.
The first time we've taken a week off in years. So I don't want to hear any complaining out of those people of you who have already complained.
We even tried to prep a roadsode, before we left, so we had something to drop, and then we got back and missed a show.
Yeah. Well, we did. We did have a show that dropped while we were gone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We got back and couldn't.
We worked extra hard to prep for it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all stuffed up. This stinking oak pollen blowing around everywhere, screwing me up. But
yeah,
it's waning. So
is it?
Oh yeah, I felt much better today.
Okay. Well, we have a couple of 1-Up boxes here.
Oh yeah. Don't start your workout yet.
Just skip the whole show. Workout, people.
Hey, take it easy on the workout, people.
Hey,
I gotta stay in shape.
I'm grumpy. Fuck all those people this week. I'm sick. And fuck you guys. Okay. This one's from Anne. It's a like a photograph book called Lake Superior Secrets.
Ooh.
Secrets. And there's a note here. She says, "Hello, thinking about that possible expedition to the Lake Nipigon area in your possible future. I made an expedition to the back of my book closet and came back with this. You and the serpent family generally might find it interesting and maybe inspirational and even informative. One photo shows a rock painting of an odd-looking creature, but I prefer the one of all the different colored pebbles. There's a map on the last page that shows where the photos were taken. Best luck with your travels, Anne. And P.S., all neatly printed, Russ." because, yes, she wrote this by hand on an old envelope. And she does a lot of recycling when she sends us stuff. This is great. And yes, it was neatly printed. I had zero problems reading it. Thank you, Anne. And the book is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, look at this. The book is beautiful.
Wow.
It's like a coffee table book full of lovely photographs. We'll have to look through it. Wow. Is that a cave system? Wow.
Looks like sandstone.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got here. I think this is from History Shift. Here, you start digging through this while I read the note. Yeah, he says, Dear Kyle, Russ, and the Snake family, sorry it has been so long since my last communication. Life has been crazy for me, but is starting to settle down, and I have been collecting goodies to send. I know you do not do these on the show much anymore, but there are goodies for all in here. First, something I am very proud of are the 3 pocket watches included. But these were handmade by my father and I.
Oh my gosh.
I hope you enjoy them. There's one for each of you and one for Father Snake, a.k.a. The Stash. And happy birthday, happy late birthday, Kyle, by the way. I have also included the first of 2 obelisks to go with your pyramids. If I can ever find a crystal sphinx, you will be all set. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Oh my God.
Wow. A crystal obelisk.
I shall shoot that with my laser.
I have also included a lovely puzzle box for Laura and the newest addition to the Snake Pit. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of the Snake Force, History Shift, Brandon Ricks, and Snacks! Wow. Dude. Is that the puzzle box? Oh, yeah, with the rose. Wow.
You've outdone yourself, my friend. Look at these watches.
Cool.
They're beautiful.
I'm sure I can't wait to give Snake Stash his pocket watch.
All right, Apple Watch. Looks like you're going to have to take a break.
Take a break.
I got my old school pocket watch. These are awesome, man. Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, so they're
They're
like
that.
set in
There's like a wooden frame there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like little blocks of wood.
Oh man. Gonna be super stylish.
Awesome.
Victorian era styling. Hell yeah. I've always wanted one of these.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
And now,
Yes. Space Weather News. From spaceweather.com. Geomagnetic storm warning. NOAA forecasters say that a G2 class geomagnetic storm is possible on April 25th when a coronal mass ejection is expected to hit Earth's magnetic field. The CME was hurled in our direction earlier today by a C3.8 class flare from sunspot AR2816. If the geomagnetic storm occurs as predicted, auroras could dip into the northern tier U.S. states from Maine to Washington. Earth-facing sunspot AR2816 exploded this morning, producing a C3.8 class solar flare. A pulse of X-rays and UV radiation ionized the top of Earth's atmosphere, producing a shortwave radio blackout over Southeast Asia. Of greater interest, however, is the shadowy wave rippling away from the blast site. And they have a little video here. And yeah, you can see when it explodes, this wave kind of goes outwards away from the blast site. So if you want to see that short video, check out spaceweather.com for today, whatever today is, the 23rd. Yeah.
very cool.
This is
Shadowy wave.
This is called a solar tsunami. It is a wave of hot plasma and magnetism about 100,000 kilometers tall, racing away from the blast site at approximately 250 kilometers per second. Such waves are usually associated with the launch of coronal mass ejections, and indeed one has been observed. Coronagraphs aboard the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory detected a CME billowing away from the sun in the hours after the flare. It is faint, but definitely Earth-directed. The initial velocity of the CME was 760 kilometers per second. Based on its speed and other factors, NOAA forecasters believe that the CME will reach Earth on April 25th, potentially sparking G2 class geomagnetic storms. So, interesting stuff happening on the sun. Solar wind speed, current conditions, solar wind speed is 397 kilometers per second. The density is 5 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 47.
Wow.
Neutron counts today is 9% above the space age average. And right now, the KP index is 2, which is rated as quiet, and the 24-hour max is also 2. So I expect that will go up within the next couple of days when that CME hits us.
All right.
Yep.
Well,
and crypto.
your future has been told.
Crypto update, which I forgot to do on the past couple of shows. Bitcoin, right as we speak, is $51,032.95 per coin, and Ethereum is $2,316.55.
Nice.
Both of those have gone down in the past 24 hours.
Good.
Yeah.
I need to get some.
Yeah, I need to buy some more. Looks like the whole market is dropping.
Good news for buyers.
That's right. All right.
Cool. Well, let's get into that book, dude.
You want to start with the book?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm skipping my news stories.
Okay.
They're lame. It's a bunch of
Got a
boring
bunch
stories.
of lame news stories.
Yeah. Bunch of skirp cards.
Okay, so what were we recently on? We ended with, we were talking about the Barnes criterion, which was this guy tried to make a statistical analysis of tools and how you can tell if they're geofacts or artifacts. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that's called the Barnes
Yeah,
criterion.
he was talking about the what were we were discussing this, something about the regular flaking or
Yeah, and like, are there bulbs? Is there certain angles of
flaking.
attack or whatever, of impact?
Yeah, and the way he was describing it was kind of weird
It is
because he
a
was
little
like
strange,
they're at
yeah.
right angles to the something.
Yeah, and then of course I don't know if it's a bombshell, but I thought it was pretty damning that they drop in the book right at the end of that whole thing is that none of those, the Barnes criterion is always applied when somebody finds tools that are too old, but they've never applied it to the Oldowan and Olduvai Gorge discoveries, which are the ones in Africa that support the model of out of Africa ancient hominid. They don't apply it to those tools.
Well, yeah, because they know those tools are
Right. That's what I'm saying. So that was basically the last thing we had covered in the book. So the next section here is called Recent Examples of Eolithic Implements from the Americas. So, despite the best efforts of Barnes and Bruhl, the Eolith question continues to haunt archaeologists. Several anomalously old, crude stone tool industries of Eolithic types have been discovered in the Americas. Most archaeologists say Siberian hunters crossed into Alaska on a land bridge that existed when the last glaciation lowered sea levels. During this period, the Canadian ice sheet blocked southward migration until about 12,000 years ago, when the first American immigrants followed an ice-free passage to what is now the United States. These people were the so-called Clovis hunters, famous for their characteristic spear points. These correspond to the highly evolved stone implements of the later Paleolithic in Europe. Nevertheless, many sites excavated with modern archaeological methods have yielded dates as great as 30,000 years for humans in the Americas. These sites include El Cedral in northern Mexico, Santa Barbara Island off of California, and the rock shelter of Boqueiro do Sítio da Pedra Furada in northern Brazil.
All right.
Other controversial sites are far older than 30,000 years. So, first example here, George Carter and the Texas Street site. A good example of a controversial American early stone tool industry reminiscent of the European eoliths is the one discovered by George Carter in the 1950s at the Texas Street excavation in San Diego. At this site, Carter claimed to have found hearths and crude stone tools at levels corresponding to the last interglacial period, some 80,000 to 90,000 years ago. Critics scoffed at these claims, referring to Carter's alleged tools as products of nature, or cartifacts. And Carter was... Cartifacts.
Real quick.
What?
Eoliths, is that referring to the Eocene? Why?
Eoliths just means crude, very crude, early lithic tools.
I was going to say, that's... All right.
Yeah, no, it's not the Eocene because that's really old.
It's
right?
really old.
But yeah, you're right, because they use Eolith and then Paleolith.
Yeah,
But that Paleolith doesn't refer to the Paleogene, right?
Paleocene, or Paleogene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Eo, Paleo, and Neo is the ones that they use for the liths.
Paleo just meaning old.
Yeah, middle. Yeah.
Okay.
Neoliths are the late ones.
Yeah.
Eoliths are the early ones. Paleo is middle.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the translation of those particular ones, but that's how they use them. That's how they're defined, basically. Okay, so Carter was later publicly defamed in a Harvard course on fantastic archaeology. However, Carter gave clear criteria for distinguishing between his tools and naturally broken rocks, and lithic experts such as John Widoft have endorsed his claims. In 1973, Carter conducted more extensive excavations at Texas Street and invited numerous archaeologists to come and view the site firsthand. Almost none responded. Carter stated, San Diego State University adamantly refused to look at work in its own backyard. In 1960, an editor of Science, the Journal of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, asked Carter to submit an article about early humans in America, and Carter did so, but when the editor sent the article out to 2 scholars for review, they rejected it. Upon being informed of this by the editor, Carter replied in a letter dated February 2nd, 1960, I must assume now that you had no idea of the intensity of feeling that reigns in the field. It is nearly hopeless to try to convey some idea of the status of the field of early man in America at the moment, but just for fun, I have a correspondent whose name I cannot use, for though he thinks I am right, he could lose his job for saying so. I have another anonymous correspondent who, as a graduate student, found evidence that would tend to prove me right, and he and his fellow student buried the evidence. They were certain that to bring it in would have cost them their chances for their PhDs. At a meeting, a young professional approached me to say, I hope you really pour it on them. I would say it if I dared, but it would cost me my job. At another meeting, a young man sidled up to say, in Dig X, they found core tools like yours at the bottom, but they just didn't publish them. Mm-hmm. The inhibiting effect of negative propaganda on the evaluation of Carter's discoveries is described by archaeologist Brian Reeves, who wrote with his co-authors in 1986, were actual artifacts uncovered at Texas Street, and is the site really last interglacial in age? Because of the weight of critical evidence presented by established archaeologists, the senior author, Reeves, like most other archaeologists, accepted the position of the skeptics uncritically, dismissing the sites and the objects as natural phenomena. But when he took the trouble to look at the evidence himself, Reeves changed his mind. He concluded that the objects were clearly tools of human manufacture, and that the Texas Street site was as old as Carter had claimed. This is annoying. Right? They write the book, and in the book, they're like, yeah, discard it. But later, he actually does some looking at it, and then he decides the guy's right after the book is written. It's too late. So, next site here is Lois Lakey and the Calico Site. Early in his career, Lois Lakey, who later became famous for his discoveries at Olduvai Gorge in Africa, began to have radical ideas about the antiquity of humans in America. At that time, scientists thought the entry date for the Siberian hunters was no greater than 5,000 years ago. So even the 10,000 to 13,000 years was a pushback of the whole Clovis hunter entry to the United States.
And all those peer-reviewed papers were wrong.
Yeah. Oh, they were all totally right. Until they were wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Completely right until they were wrong. Lakey recalled, back in 1929 and 1930, when I was teaching students at the University of Cambridge, I began to tell my students that man must have been in the New World at least 15,000 years, and I shall never forget when Alice Hrdlicka, that great man from the Smithsonian Institution, happened to be at Cambridge, and he was told by my professor, I was only a student supervisor, that Dr. Leakey was telling students that man must have been in the Americas for 15,000 years or more. And he burst into my rooms. He didn't even wait to shake hands. And he said, Leakey, what is this I hear? Are you preaching heresy? No, sir, said Leakey. And he replied, You are telling students that man was in America 15,000 years ago. What evidence have you? And Leakey answered, No positive evidence, purely circumstantial evidence, but with man from Alaska to Cape Horn, with many different languages and at least 2 civilizations, is it not possible that he was present only the few thousands of years that you at present allow? Leakey continued to harbor unorthodox views on this matter, and in 1964 he made an effort to collect some definite evidence at the Calico Site in the Mojave Desert of California. This site is situated near the shore of now vanished Pleistocene Lake Mannix. Over a period of 18 years of excavation under the direction of Ruth D. Simpson, 11,400 Eolithic artifacts were recovered from a number of levels. The oldest artifact-bearing level has been given an age of 200,000 years by the uranium series methods of dating. However, as happened with Texas Street, mainstream archaeologists rejected the artifacts discovered at Calico as products of nature, and the Calico site is passed over in silence in popular accounts of archaeology. Leakey's biographer, Sonia Cole, said, For many colleagues who felt admiration and affection for Lewis and his family, the Calico years were an embarrassment and a sadness. And this is the guy who became famous later for the Olduvai Gorge discoveries, the African stuff, right? So this is like, they just take this section of his life where he was finding artifacts in the Americas that were dated to 200,000 years ago, and it's just like erased that stuff from all the textbooks because he's famous for his discoveries in Africa, but not going to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
he was wrong about that stuff. That's why.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll take a break. Yeah, break time.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Stuffed up, but still ready to enjoy an ice cold beer while listening to a book report. And
Wow.
we are. What? Is that loud?
No.
Yeah, I hit you with the.
Yeah, I guess the beer must be...
It's very effervescent.
It must be some condensation on there because you clapped and splashed me.
It is ice cold. But yeah, we are joined by the Watcher. Obviously, he wasn't in at the very beginning, so we couldn't introduce him. But here he is.
Yeah.
Watcher, how you doing, buddy? Glad to have you on the show again.
Doing great. Glad we're back on the grind.
Yeah.
The trip was great. Lots of good people, lots of good times, good sights. Just awesome.
Yep, the Watcher was there carrying his medical bag around with him
Yep.
everywhere, and
Never had to use it. Well, we did have to wrap Brad in
yeah, we had to give Brad the emergency blanket,
the space blanket.
which I saved, by the way. I was like, man, this thing's actually pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
So yeah, thanks for
We
that.
had to tape Russ's fingers too. He was jamming too hard.
Oh yeah,
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
yep, rocking that drum,
Yeah.
the old hand cannon.
Jammed it too hard in the morning, and then we were going to jam that night, and I needed to wrap my fingers. So, Watcher took care of that as well.
Yep, it was good to have you there, buddy,
Yep.
watching over us.
Yeah. Never had to shout, medic!
Thank God.
Only
It was
that
definitely
one.
good to be there.
Only that one time when he vanished.
Yeah, we did shout.
I got all mad.
Well,
Where the hell is the Watcher?
Yeah, day one, lost the watcher. That's pretty much every trip. All right, back to the book here. So we're still at the Calico Artifacts here. The artifacts of Calico also have their defenders, who give elaborate arguments showing that they were human artifacts, not geofacts resulting from natural processes. Philip Tobias, the well-known associate of Raymond Dart, discoverer of Australopithecus, declared in 1979, "When Dr. Leakey first showed me a small collection of pieces from Calico, I was at once convinced that some, though not all, of the small samples showed unequivocal signs of human authorship." Ruth D. Simpson stated in 1986, "It would be difficult for nature to produce many specimens resembling man-made unifacial tools with completely unidirectional edge retouch done in a uniform and directed manner. The Calico Site has yielded many completely unifacial stone tools with uniform edge retouch, and these include end scrapers, side scrapers, and gravers. Flake tools with unifacial unidirectional chipping like those found at Calico are typical of the European Eoliths. Examples are also found among the Oldowan industries of East Africa. Among the best tools that turned up at Calico was an excellent beaked graver. And bola stones have also been reported." So those are the... Yeah.
Those are
They groove a round stone so
for
that
the
you can...
for the atlatl.
I think they're, like bolas, like there's two of them with a
Yeah.
leather
Okay,
cord between
yeah.
and you
Spin it
and throw it.
Wrap it around somebody's legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, run them down and
Right.
hit them with a club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, however, the Calico discoveries have been met with silence, ridicule, and opposition in the ranks of mainstream paleoanthropology. Ruth Simpson nevertheless stated, "The database for a very early man in the New World is growing rapidly and can no longer simply be ignored because it does not fit current models of prehistory in the New World. There is a need for flexibility in thinking to assure unbiased peer review." And I think the interesting thing about that, like one of the things I'll point out is that this date, even the 200,000 years ago date, there's nothing, no one would blink an eye at that if it was in Europe.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's in the Americas. Okay.
Which, I mean, that's weird because, the interglacial or the glaciated periods when the ocean levels are so much lower. Like, I mean...
couldn't you land hop and shore sail all the way to...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the problem is.
I mean, if people could take canoes to Easter Island,
Yeah.
why couldn't you, if the sea level...
And we don't even know what were the currents like then. They would have been changed.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Why is that so controversial?
I don't know. Okay, Brazil, Toca da Esperança. Support for the authenticity of the Calico tools has come from a find in Brazil. In 1982, Maria Beltrao found a series of caves with wall paintings in the state of Bahia. In 1985, a trench was cut in the Toca de Esperança, which is the Cave of Hope. And excavations in 1986 and 1987 yielded crude stone tools associated with Pleistocene mammals. When the bones were tested by the uranium series method, ages in excess of 200,000 years were obtained, and the maximum age was 295,000 years. The discovery was reported to the scientific world by Henri de Lumley, a famous French archaeologist, which means I'm probably mispronouncing his name. The tools were fashioned from quartz pebbles and were somewhat like those from Olduvai Gorge. The nearest source of quartz pebbles is about 10 kilometers from the cave site. Yeah, so the idea that they were brought there by nature is a little tough to believe. I think that's the point of that. The nearest source of quartz pebbles is 10 kilometers from the cave site. De Lumley and his co-workers said in their report, "The evidence seems to indicate that early man entered into the American continent much before previously thought." And they went on to say, "In light of the discoveries at the Toca da Esperança, it is much easier to interpret the lithic industry of the Calico Site in the Mojave Desert near Yermo, San Bernardino County in California, which is dated between 150 and 200,000 years. So yeah, that, it's one thing to have one site that seems to be anomalously ancient, but now you've got another one in Brazil. And then, of course, there's also Huatlico, which dates around to this same time period.
Yeah.
According to De Lumley and his associates, humans and human ancestors entered the Americas from northern Asia several times during the Pleistocene. The early migrants who manufactured the tools in the Brazilian cave were, they said, Homo erectus. While this view is in harmony with the consensus on human evolution, there is no reason why the tools in the Toca da Esperança could not have been made by anatomically modern humans. As we have several times mentioned, such tools are still being manufactured by humans in various parts of the world. Okay, Monte Verde in Chile. Another archaeological, I think Graham Hancock has mentioned this one. Maybe in... Was it? It wasn't America before. It was the one before that. Magicians. Yeah. Another archaeological site that is bearing on the evaluation of crude stone tools is the Monte Verde site in south central Chile. According to a report in Mammoth Trumpet in 1984, this site was first surveyed by archaeologist Tom Dillahay in 1976. Although the age of 12,500 to 13,500 years for the site is not highly anomalous, the archaeological finds uncovered there challenged the standard Clovis hunter theory. The culture of the Monte Verde people was completely distinct from that of the Clovis hunters. Although the Monte Verde people made some advanced bifacial implements, they mostly made minimally modified pebble tools. Indeed, to a large extent, they obtained stone tools by selecting naturally occurring split pebbles. Some of these show signs of nothing more than usage. Others show signs of deliberate retouching of a working edge, and this is strongly reminiscent of the descriptions of the European eoliths. So even though it's like Clovis era period, the dating seems to imply that the tools are so crude that they are like these very ancient European eoliths that are like unifacials, which implies that there's a completely separate group of people living in Chile at the same time that the Clovis people were in the Americas, which is, then the question is, well, how did they get there?
Yeah.
In this case, the vexing question of artifacts versus nature facts was resolved by a fortunate circumstance. The site is located in a boggy area in which perishable plant and animal matter has been preserved.
Cool.
Thus, 2 of the pebble tools were found hafted to wooden handles.
Oh, man.
So you can't even argue, right?
Nice.
12 architectural foundations were found, made of cut wooden planks and small tree trunks staked in place. There were large communal hearths, as well as a small charcoal oven lined with clay. Some of the stored clay bore the footprint of a child, 8 to 10 years old. 3 crude wooden mortars were also found, held in place by wooden stakes, and grinding stones were uncovered along with the remains of wild potatoes, medicinal plants, and seacoast plants with a high salt content. All in all, the Monte Verde site sheds an interesting light on the kind of creatures who might have made and used crude pebble tools during the Pliocene and Miocene in Europe, or at the Plio-Pleistocene boundary in Africa. In this case, the culture was well equipped with domestic amenities made from perishable materials. Far from being subhuman, the cultural level was what we might expect of anatomically modern humans in a simple village setting even today. By an accident of preservation, we thus see at Monte Verde artifacts representing an advanced culture accompanying the crudest kinds of stone tools. At sites millions of years older, we see only the stone tools, although perishable artifacts of the kinds found at Monte Verde may have once accompanied them. So I think that's interesting. He's like, because this place was in a bog, it was preserved by a bog, right? All this biological material that shows actually an advanced village in terms of wood and ovens and
wood cutting. And all,
So they made really crude stone tools, but everything else that they were doing with simpler to work with materials was more advanced. They had
Yeah.
they had hearths, they had houses, foundations, clay ovens for making pottery.
Yeah.
And somebody even let their kids step in the clay. When I'm sure that's on purpose.
We're still doing it.
Yeah, we still do that today. But yeah, his point is like, look how advanced they were, even though their tools were what we consider to be the crudest kind.
Just their stone tools, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to work.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And even if you don't have anybody who is a master of making stone tools, you can still build stuff like carpentry wise and with clay and,
Yeah. It'd be difficult to make saws.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow they dealt with the wood.
Right. I mean, you can break wood even if you can't.
You can
cut
split it, yeah.
And you can split it, yeah.
And with crude stone tools, you can split wood.
Right.
Right.
Right. And if it's in a bog, there just may not be a whole lot of stone around. You'd have to range pretty far to
Well, there
find good
probably
rock.
wasn't a bog when they were living there.
Maybe not, yeah. Yeah. But it's still interesting. The point they're making there is that, like, in other places, all we find are these crude eoliths,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't advanced. They didn't have houses and,
Right.
ovens and this is recent, relatively so, 12,000 to 13,000 years ago. So at a 2 million year old site where you find the same kind of eoliths, they could have had the same stuff.
A lot of kitchens have like one stone tool in them.
Yeah.
It's like the mortar and pestle, or I guess that's two.
Yeah. Yeah. The cutting board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like 10,000 years from now, there'll just be a mortar and pestle.
Yeah. Where
In
your
the
house
dirt.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe some cut blocks of
Yeah.
limestone or something.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of rock facades are just done with rocks that cleave flat,
Yeah.
or even river rock that's naturally
Natural.
shaped.
Yeah.
So it would just be a pile of like river rock and then a mortar and pestle.
Yeah. Yeah. Very crude. Didn't even have any arrowheads.
Yeah. This is a very well made mortar and pestle, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Recent finds in Pakistan. Eolith-like implements that do not fit into standard ideas of human evolution continue to be found in parts of the world outside the Americas. Some fairly recent finds by British archaeologists in Pakistan provide an example. These crude chopping tools are about 2 million years old. But according to the dominant African homeland idea, the human ancestor of that time period, Homo habilis, should have been confined to Africa. Some scientists considering the Pakistan tools tried to discredit the discovery. Anthropologist Sally McBrearty complained in a New York Times report that the discoverers have not supplied enough evidence that the specimens are that old and that they are of human manufacture. Our review of anomalous stone implements should make us suspicious of this sort of charge. Scientists typically demand higher levels of proof for anomalous finds than for evidence that fits within the established ideas of human evolution. A 1987 report from the British journal New Scientists suggests that McBrearty was being overly skeptical, concerning doubts expressed about the stratigraphical context and age of the stone tools. The New Scientist stated, "Such doubts do not apply in the case of the stone pieces from the Soane Valley southeast of Rawalpindi," argues Robin Dennell, the field director of the Paleolithic Project of the British Archaeological Mission and the University of Sheffield. He and his colleague Helen Rendell, a geologist at the University of Sussex, report that the stone pieces, all of quartzite, were so firmly embedded in a deposit of conglomerate and gritstone called the Upper Eolithic series that they had to chisel them out. According to the New Scientist, the dating was accomplished using a combination of paleomagnetic and stratigraphic studies. So the paleomagnetic is probably how they arrive at a number, and then the stratigraphy is how they get the relative dating down to the level they want, or up to the level they want from the paleomagnetic series.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Relative to the magnetic field lines or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the the sculptor was saying they didn't prove that they are part of that layer or whatever, and this new scientist was like, look, they had to chisel them out of this. So don't say they're not part of the layer. They were part of the conglomerate, you know.
Yeah.
So what about McBraerty's suggestion that the stone objects were not made by humans? And the new scientist gave a more balanced view. Of the pieces that they extracted, 8, Dennell believes are definite artifacts. In Dennell's view, the least equivocal artifact is a piece of quartzite that a hominid individual supposedly struck in 3 directions with a hammerstone, removing 7 flakes from it. This multifaceted flaking, together with the fresh appearance of the scars left on the remaining core, make a very convincing case for human involvement. So what is going on with the find in Pakistan? Scientists holding the view that Homo erectus was the first representative of the Homo line to leave Africa and did so about 1 million years ago were apparently quite determined to discredit stone tools found in Pakistan that are about 2 million years old, rather than modify their ideas. And we can just imagine how such scientists would react to stone tools found in Miocene contexts.
Which is 5.3 to 23.7 million years
Yeah.
old.
Right. So even in Pakistan, you know, if it's older than 1 million years, that's too old because that doesn't, and that's just because it doesn't fit the out of Africa thing.
Yeah.
Like even if you could, and I guess the other problem is you'd have to push it back to human ancestors that probably weren't supposed to be able to make tools as well.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a fuzzy. The more I've been reading through this book and going back and making marks and stuff, you kind of get the idea that like it's still up in the air, even with all the standard model stuff. Is like, well, at what point did these human ancestors, they've got this line of did they start making tools?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they seem to sort of draw lines in the sand that as you move farther away from Africa, the lines have more and more recent dates in terms of when you can find tools there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Siberia and India. Many other discoveries of stone implements around 2 million years old have been made at other Asian sites in Siberia and northwestern India. In 1961, hundreds of crude pebble tools were found near Gorno-Altaysk on the Ulalinka River in Siberia. According to a 1984 report by Russian scientists A.P. Oklidinov and L.A. Rogozin, the tools were found in layers that were 1.5 to 2.5 million years old. Another Russian scientist, Yuri Mokhanov, discovered stone tools resembling the European Eoliths at a site overlooking the Lena River at Diring Yurlak in Siberia. The formations from which these implements were recovered were dated by potassium argon and magnetic methods to 1.8 million years before present. Recent evidence from India also takes us back about 2 million years. Many discoveries of stone tools have been made in the Siwalik Hills region of northwestern India. The Siwaliks derive their name from the demigod Shiva, the lord of the forces of universal destruction. In 1981...
5G!
In 1981, Anik Ram Sankyan of the Anthropological Survey of India found a stone tool near a village in the late Pliocene Tatro Formation, which is over 2 million years old. Other tools were recovered from the same formation. The above-mentioned Siberian and Indian discoveries at 1.5 to 2.5 million years old do not agree very well with the standard view that Homo erectus was the first representative of the Homo line to emigrate from Africa, doing so about 1 million years ago. And here is an example from an even more remote time. In 1982, K.N. Prasad of the Geological Survey of India reported the discovery of a crude unifacial hand-axe pebble tool in the Miocene Nagri Formation near Haritalangyar in the Himalayan foothills of northwestern India. Prasad stated in his report, the implement was recovered in situ during remeasuring of the geological succession to assess the thickness of the beds. Care was taken to confirm the exact provenance of the material in order to rule out any possibility of its derivation from younger horizons. Prasad thought the tool had been manufactured by a very ape-like creature called Ramapithecus. The occurrence of this pebble tool in such ancient sediments, said Prasad, indicates that early hominids such as Ramapithecus fashioned tools, were bipedal with erect posture, and probably utilized the implements for hunting. But today, most scientists regard Ramapithecus not as a human ancestor, but as the ancestor of the living orangutans. This newly defined Ramapithecus was definitely not a maker of stone tools. So, who made the Miocene tool reported by Prasad? The makers could very well have been anatomically modern humans living in the Miocene. Even if we were to propose that some primitive creature like Homo habilis made the Miocene tool, that would still raise big questions. According to current ideas, the first tool makers arose in Africa about 2 million years ago.
And just for reference, I was looking at this grain size chart. Pebbles are from 0.16 inches to 2.52 inches in size.
Okay.
And then it goes to cobbles and then boulders.
Yeah, cobbles are like fist-sized things, right?
Cobbles are 2.52 to, it's really hard to read, 12 inches is where boulders start.
Okay. Yeah, a foot.
Yeah. So 2.5 inches is considered a pebble. So they're like making pebble tools.
Yeah.
Out of 2.5 inch. So 2.5 inch arrowhead, you know,
Yeah.
is a pebble tool.
Right. So who made the Eolithic implements? Even after having heard all of the arguments for Eoliths being of human manufacture, arguments which will certainly prove convincing to many, some might still legitimately maintain a degree of doubt. Could such a person, it might be asked, be forgiven for not accepting the Eoliths? And the answer to that question is a qualified yes. The qualification is that one should then reject other stone tool industries of a similar nature.
Yeah.
And this would mean rejecting many accepted industries, including the Oldowan industries of East Africa, discovered by Lois and Mary Leakey. When illustrations of the Eoliths found on the Kent Plateau and in East Anglia are set alongside those of tools from the Olduvai Gorge, we do not notice much of a difference in workmanship. The most reasonable conclusion is that both the European Eoliths and the Oldowan tools of East Africa were intentionally manufactured. But by whom? Scientists accept practically without question that the Oldowan implements were made by Homo habilis, a primitive hominid species. It should not, therefore, be completely unthinkable for scientists to entertain the possibility that a creature like Homo habilis might also have made the Eoliths from East Anglia and the Kent Plateau, some of which are roughly comparable in age to the Oldowan tools. But there is another possibility. Mary Leakey said this in her book about the Oldowan stone tools. An interesting present-day example of unretouched flakes used as cutting tools has recently been recorded in southwest Africa and may be mentioned briefly. An expedition from the State Museum discovered 2 stone-using groups of the Ovajimba people who not only make choppers for breaking open bones and other heavy work, but also employ simple flakes, unretouched and unhafted, for cutting and skinning. Nothing, therefore, prevents one from entertaining the possibility that anatomically modern humans might have been responsible for even the crudest of stone tools found at Olduvai Gorge and the European Eolith sites. So I think this is an important point, that number one, you can, if you're skeptical of all of these European Eoliths and the American Eoliths, and you want to discard them, fine. But you should in the interest of being fair, also have to discard all the accepted stuff that has been found in Africa because they look the same. And then the other point is that modern humans to this day make tools that look exactly the same as these eoliths that are found in these very ancient strata. And so saying that it must have been Homo habilis because they were primitive, making those ancient tools doesn't stand up. Right.
Yeah.
A tool is only as advanced when you're making a stone tool out of a rock. It's only as advanced as it needs to be to do its job.
Right, but that's not the real reasoning for them choosing Homo habilis. It's the timeline, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's nothing to say, like, in other words, they wouldn't, like, these scientists would not
I see what you're saying.
not believe that these modern people are making those same types of tools.
No.
They're just, when they're looking at them and they're that old, they're like, well, it must have been Homo habilis because that's what matches the
right
out of Africa timeline, evolutionary timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. But if they
But it's
found,
still a good point,
but if they found next to those Eolithic tools, if they found a beautifully crafted, like pressure flaked, something that looked like a Clovis point in that same strata that was supposed to be 2 million years old, they would not accept it because it can't be that advanced.
Yeah, it fell down in a crack.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're right. They don't say it's Homo habilis because they're primitive, but they wouldn't accept an advanced tool at that same layer.
Right.
Because they're supposed to be primitive.
It could have been one genius. Homo habilis.
Homo habilis.
He didn't reproduce because, he was doing science. He's just like, I don't have time for that.
He's like, I got to calibrate
I'm working on my stone tools. Get away.
The standard reply will be that there are no fossils showing that humans of the fully modern type were around then in the early Pleistocene or late Pliocene, roughly 1 to 2 million years ago, whereas there are fossils of Homo habilis. But Homo sapiens fossils are quite rare even at late Pleistocene sites where there are lots of stone tools and other signs of human habitation.
This is a strange, that is weird.
Yeah. It has to be burial practices that makes that happen, right? They didn't bury them.
You can't bury everybody. I mean, like, people go out and they get killed.
Yeah,
and no one's there to bury them.
Right. And if there's not a cataclysm, then they end up being scattered by animals and they don't get fossilized, right? But if you're always doing sky burials or whatever, and you're not actually putting people in the ground when they die. Or burning them or something like that.
There's got to be some skull fragments left in those fires. Some kind of bone.
Maybe they threw them in the sea, I mean, what if they did water burial? I get it. They didn't all live by water.
Yeah. They didn't all live by water.
Yeah.
It's I don't know why. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It is
But
weird.
they did something different because we find their kill sites and there's just like tons of fossilized Pleistocene mammal bones and yet no bones of the humans that were, so they did something totally different.
Maybe they never died.
They lived a very long time.
They just didn't die.
It was the same guy doing all that stuff, just one dude. Immortal habilis.
That's right. It was primitive aliens. They came here in their spaceships, but they were real primitive and they made stone tools and did a bunch of stuff, killed all the Pleistocene megafauna, and then they left.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be time travel tourists. People from the future are traveling back in time and doing safaris.
Yeah.
That's why there's no bones.
They've got to go to the Pleistocene because they're...
Yeah.
That's that's where the big hunts are all
That's
at.
right, exactly. That's why we don't find any bones. They come back and it's like, what is it called? Naked and Afraid or whatever. But they do it from the future and they send you back to the Pleistocene and you have nothing and you just got to make your own tools and then kill mammoths. And then you go back to the future and there's just no fossils.
That's a pretty good...
That's my theory.
That's pretty good.
Naked and Afraid from the future.
Yeah.
All right, I think we can take a break.
Okay.
There's only a couple of sand bits left. Yeah.
Snakes!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. Sickisode.
Hey, you're doing pretty good.
What is this? 195. Yeah, episode 195, Sickisode. It should be 196-sode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's all right.
And we got a lot of listener communications, too. We got to get to. We'll have to probably just do a.
Yeah, the emails have been stacking up for sure.
We'll just do another communications sode.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like to get to the point where we can go back to reading a few before we do the rest of the show. I mean, because a lot of these are from months ago at this point, you know, or maybe not, maybe a month ago or more, talking about older episodes and stuff. So yeah, we're just gonna have to go through them.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. Maybe we can set that up, the communication so for the episode that drops while we're in this Gablet.
Ah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, worked it out. Live.
Plan. The plans never change, folks. Once we set those plans, they are set in stone. You can always rely on a Snake Bros plan.
I'll just
Fail.
Sure.
Failure is not an option.
Well, that part is true.
Yeah, but all of it's true. Think I'm lying over here?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah, the part about the plans, that's a huge lie.
Plans are always flawless. Executed flawlessly.
They are.
Zero mistakes.
But they are subject to change. At a
never
moment's notice.
changing.
Okay. So back to the question of of missing fossils. As described in chapters 7 and 12, fossil skeletal remains of human beings of the fully modern type have been discovered by scientists in strata at least as old as the lower levels of Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. Among them may be numbered the fossil human skeleton discovered in 1913 by Dr. Hans Reck in Bed 2 of Olduvai Gorge, and some fossil human femurs discovered by Richard Leakey at Lake Turkana in Kenya, in a formation slightly older than Bed 1 at Olduvai.
That was before they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, that is what they say. It is therefore not correct to say that there is no fossil evidence whatsoever for a fully human presence in the lower levels of Olduvai Gorge. In addition to fossil evidence, we have a report from Mary Leakey about a controversial circular formation of stones at the DK site in Lower Bed 1. She suggested that they may have been placed as supports for branches or poles stuck into the ground to form a windbreak or rough shelter. In general appearance, she wrote, the circle resembles temporary structures often made by present-day nomadic peoples who build a low stone wall round their dwellings to serve either as a windbreak or as a base to support upright branches which are bent over and covered with either skins or grass. For illustration, Mary Leakey provided a photograph of such a temporary shelter made by the Okambambi tribe of Southwest Africa, now in Namibia. And not everyone agreed with Leakey's interpretation of this stone circle, but accepting Leakey's version, the obvious question may be raised. If she believed the structure resembled those made by present-day nomadic peoples like the Okambambi, then why could she not assume that anatomically modern humans made the Olduvai stone circle 1.75 million years ago? Interestingly enough, there is evidence that some of the tools from Olduvai Gorge were quite advanced. J. Desmond Clark wrote in his foreword to the 1971 study by Mary Leakey, here are artifacts that conventional usage associates typologically with much later times, the late Paleolithic or even later. Diminutive scraper forms, awls, burins, and a grooved and pecked cobble. We note, however, that tools of the type found in the late Paleolithic and even later are considered by modern scientists to be specifically the work of Homo sapiens rather than Homo erectus or Homo habilis.
How old were these? Like an awl? Like usually those are made out of bone.
Yeah, 1.75 million years.
So, man, I wonder if it was like
probably fossilized.
Lithified bone.
Advanced stone tools also turn up in the European Eolith assemblages. We might thus entertain the possibility that anatomically modern humans were responsible for some, if not all, of the Oldowan and Eolithic tools. So this is what we were just talking about. Like, you find a ton of Eoliths, but mixed into those Eoliths are tools that are considered usually to be much finer work that you don't find until much later people.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just saying, like, yeah, you make a whole bunch of crude tools because that's what you don't need.
Easy, and
yeah.
you don't need a craftsman. And
right, but every once in a while you find this incredibly finely worked thing that they were using to do something specific. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not a unifacial, it's bifacial, and it's worked very carefully. Or there's a bone awl that's like a needle.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean,
and they have been found with the ancient European eoliths, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
They're just not nearly as numerous as the, very simple flakes and pebble tools.
Yeah, it's not a perfect analogy, but I mean, we have that all around us all the time. Like, you can go buy, a really cheap knife.
Yeah.
Or you can spend hundreds of dollars on a knife that's made by handmade by an awesome craftsman.
Right. Yeah.
Really fine work. Or you can get some really crappy, just not very good metal.
Yeah.
Still made with machine tools and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, or maybe the difference between like a wood splitter, just a metal wedge.
Yeah.
Versus a finely crafted knife, which is a totally different thing that you used for fine work. Whereas the thing for splitting wood, it doesn't have to be, it just needs to be a wedge of metal attached to a haft, right?
Yeah.
And now the hafts are usually like fiber, they're they're
fiberglass.
Fiberglass or whatever, but you can find old ones that are attached to a wooden haft. It's just hammered through it, and there's some nails put in the end to make it spread out. It's a very crudely made tool, but it does exactly what it needs to do, which is be heavy and split wood, right? That's all it needs to do. Whereas, you get a knife, and the knife is very finely crafted, and the metal is different from edge to the top to make the blade right, and and you can do fine work with that. And the knife is more expensive than that wood splitter.
Yep.
So, okay. Lewis and Mary Lakey also found in bed 1 of Olduvai Gorge bola stones and an apparent leather working tool that might have been used to fashion leather cords for the bolas. Using bola stones to capture game would seem to require a degree of intelligence and dexterity beyond that possessed by Homo habilis. This concern is heightened by the recent discovery of a relatively complete skeleton of Homo habilis, which shows this hominid to have been far more ape-like than scientists previously imagined. And that's the other thing I've noticed. You find a couple of bones of something, and then they build a skeleton out of it. And then when eventually and you see it, and it's supposed to be a human ancestor, and it's some blend of ape and human.
Yeah.
But then when they finally find a complete skeleton of that thing with those same bones, you find out that it's actually pretty much an ape. Way more ape-like than they were building out of their model based on the couple of bones that they found. It's far more ape-like than what they built. And it doesn't look nearly as much as like a missing link as what they made up before they had the complete skeleton.
Yeah.
And that's what they're saying here. Like the discovery of a complete skeleton of Homo habilis, it shows that it's far more ape-like than they had previously imagined. And so that doesn't mean it couldn't make tools.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is it the morphology of it doesn't really, why does that determine its tool-making abilities or its intelligence?
Yeah.
I know that there's the thing with brain size and all that kind of stuff.
Right, but does that even
matter?
count?
I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because yes, good question. But the point is that you could. What's to say that an ape-like creature that's not an ape but very much similar morphology, couldn't be vastly more intelligent than humans in some future time?
Yeah.
If it's Anyway, another thing I was thinking, going back to the tools and this is just weird. I was just thinking about our civilization. let's take a plastic knife.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Cheapest tool.
Yeah.
Not very good. Throw it in the trash after using it once.
Right.
But it shows a much more advanced technological ability.
Yeah, there's an infrastructure behind that
and
tool.
there's like millions of brilliant people and tools and all these things that had to be developed in order for that really cheap, throwaway, not very good tool to be made.
Yeah. That's right.
And like those might be things that survive through cataclysms and whatever, get buried in sediment and that are unearthed by future civilizations. And so if you have like this amazing handmade knife that was like hammered out by a guy, a blacksmith or something, or even a copper tool.
Yeah.
Right? It could be well made. The craftsmanship is awesome, but it's all handmade. They could have picked the copper up off the ground.
Yep.
Learned how to harden it, all that kind of stuff. So there are technologies involved, but then you have this like crappy
Plastic.
primitive, like,
picnic knife.
yeah. It's like almost useless.
Still got mayonnaise stuck to it because that's the only thing you can do with it.
Yet that tool shows like just
It's far more
unimaginable by any
implies-
single person, the amount of technology and know-how that went into making it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Not just the plastics, but then it's cast, right? It's put in a
that's
mold.
what I'm saying. The tool,
They
like,
make
it's just-
millions of them by squirting plastic into the mold, and yeah.
no single person knows how that tool was
And you have to
made.
have the entire oil industry to get
all the technologies that go into that,
Yep.
and it's the refining.
Yeah.
That's interesting to think
Yeah.
about. Plastic knife. Then you have the spork.
Yeah, and the food. It's a plastic fork with little spoons at the end of each time. Extremely useful.
For memes.
So, where does this leave us? In today's world, we find that humans manufacture stone tools of various levels of sophistication, from primitive to advanced. And as described in this chapter and the next two chapters, we also find evidence of the same variety of tools in the Pleistocene, the Pliocene, Miocene, and even as far back as the Eocene. What's that? Eocene would put it.
That's what was it?
Between-
33.
No, Eocene would be between 55 and, from 55 million to 33.7 million years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. The simplest explanation is that anatomically modern humans who make such a spectrum of tools today also made them in the past. One could also imagine that such humans coexisted with other more primitive human-like creatures who also made stone tools. And this is becoming more accepted now that we coexisted with these. That some of these things that were for a while being considered as human ancestors are actually just brother or sister branches of the human race. And we coexisted with them.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So, crude paleoliths represent an advance over the eoliths. Eoliths are naturally broken pieces of stone that are used as tools with little or no further modification. A working edge might be slightly retouched, or it might simply show signs of wear. Paleoliths, however, are often deliberately flaked from stone cores and are more extensively modified. So the finds of Carlos Ribeiro, is that right? Ribeiro? Yeah, Ribeiro in Portugal. The first hint of Carlos Ribeiro's discoveries came to our attention quite accidentally. While going through the writings of the 19th century American geologist J.D. Whitney, we encountered a sentence or two about Ribeiro having discovered flint implements in Miocene formations near Lisbon in Portugal. We found more brief mentions in the works of S. Lang, a popular English science writer of the late 19th century. Curious, we searched libraries, but turned up no works under Ribeiro's name and found ourselves at a dead end. Sometime later, Ribeiro's name turned up again, this time in the 1957 English edition of Fossil Men by Boule and Valois, who rather curtly dismissed the work of the 19th century Portuguese geologist. We were, however, led by Boule and Valois to the 1883 edition of Les Préhistoriques by Gabriel De Mortier, who gave a favorable report of Ribeiro's discoveries in French. By tracing out the references mentioned in De Mortier's footnotes, we gradually uncovered a wealth of remarkably convincing original reports in French journals of archaeology and anthropology from the latter part of the 19th century. The search for this buried evidence was illuminating, demonstrating how the scientific establishment treats reports of facts that no longer conform to accepted views. Keep in mind that for most current students of paleoanthropology, Ribeiro and his discoveries simply do not exist. You have to go back to textbooks printed over 30 years ago to find even a mention of him. In 1857, Carlos Ribeiro was named to head the Geological Survey of Portugal, and he would also be elected to the Portuguese Academy of Sciences. During the years of 1860 to 63, he conducted studies of stone implements found in Portugal's Quaternary strata. 19th century geologists generally divided the geological periods into four main groups. One, the primary, encompassing the periods from the Precambrian through the Permian. Two, the secondary, encompassing the periods from the Triassic through the Cretaceous. Three, the tertiary, encompassing the periods from the Paleocene through the Pliocene. And four, the Quaternary, encompassing the Pleistocene and recent periods. During the course of his investigations, Ribeiro learned that flints bearing signs of human work were being found in tertiary beds between Canergado and Alamquer, two villages in the basin of the Tagus River northeast of Lisbon. Ribeiro immediately began his own investigations and in many localities found flakes of worked flint and quartzite in tertiary beds. But Ribeiro felt he must submit to the prevailing scientific dogma, still current, that human beings were not older than the Quaternary. In 1866, on the official geological maps of Portugal, Ribeiro reluctantly assigned Quaternary ages to certain of the implement-bearing strata. Upon seeing these maps, the French geologist Edouard de Venruel took issue with Ribeiro's judgment, pointing out that the so-called Quaternary beds were certainly Pliocene or Miocene. Meanwhile, in France, the Abbé Louis Bourgeois, a reputable investigator, had reported finding stone implements in tertiary beds. Influenced by let's see, how do I say this guy's name? De Verneuil. His criticism and the discoveries of Bourgeois, Ribeiro began openly reporting that human implements were being found in Pliocene and Miocene formations in Portugal.
All right, so I can see how it wouldn't matter, or I mean, in some ways it wouldn't matter what, if it was 19th century, 18th century, whatever, to be able to recognize, worked tools.
Yeah.
This is like, it's not a hard science, right? I mean, there's, you can come up with terms like, okay, well, if it's got this type of flaking or whatever, it could be natural, this type. But I think after, enough observation, you can kind of get an idea, a feel for it. And it's going to be opinion.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially with the Eoliths, right?
Yeah.
It's
going to be opinion. But you can be an authority on that, whatever. Now, with the geological dating and all that kind of stuff, you can see the scientific development ways of, doing ice cores and all of this kind of stuff to make correlations across the globe with different events, volcanic eruptions, magnetic pole shifts and all that sort of thing to give you all this contextual dating. So like, I guess the thing I'm pointing out is that thinking about like these guys in the 19th century arguing over whether the tools were man-made, that's just a matter of opinion based on the the observer.
Yeah.
Right. What layer they're in and how old they are, like they're arguing over whether or not they were in the Quaternary or the Tertiary,
Yeah.
could be updated later based on new evidence from new scientific techniques and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah. Well, I think the point they're making right there is that this geologist, Ribeiro, labeled that strata as being Quaternary because the implements were being found in it. And current models said that you can't find human implements in anything earlier than that.
that's right.
And then other geologists were looking at his dating and being like, that's definitely not Quaternary layering, you know? And he was like, okay, so then human implements are being found in Pliocene materials.
Right.
Miocene stuff.
Right. I'm making a separate point from all of that.
Yeah.
Just that, like, because a lot of this stuff that we've looked at, you know, not just with this book, but like, you know, some of the Velikovsky stuff. That there are scientific studies that are done a long time ago, and the technology's come a long way, and so it's in a lot of those. It's like, well, you know, how much data did they have to back up what they were thinking they were finding and all that kind of stuff. Whereas,
and that's also interesting because in this book, a lot of times they'll tell you, and I'm not sure that they've said it explicitly yet, but this happens over and over in this book where they're like, okay, artifact A is found in strata B, and no matter what they said at the time this was discovered, because it was discovered in the 19th century or discovered in the 1800s, we have contacted scientists and said, how old is that strata?
Yeah.
In terms of modern science. And then they'll say it's 350 million years old. You know? So I guess the question is like, do they still think that this is Miocene strata now, like they did in the 19th century? And I'm betting most of the time it hasn't changed.
Yeah, probably.
Right. I think that, well, I can't say this for sure, but I think they would mention it in here. They would say, you know, at the time this was considered to be this layer, this period, but recent studies have said, well, this is not Miocene, this is actually Oligocene stuff. Yeah,
I just pointed to like the introduction to the book, where he's talking about the difficulty in analyzing all of these scientific studies, because like one person went there and wrote, the epistemology, exactly. That's kind of what I was going.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it would be a good thing, you know, like, can we look up these, like, for example, we were talking about the Red Crag in the last couple of episodes. Like, is that Red Crag formation still today considered to be the same geological period as it was when they were finding these implements in it in the early 1900s?
Right.
You know, has that changed? And what's interesting here is that it does change, because it says reluctantly assigned Quaternary ages to these implement-bearing strata, and then these French geologists are like, that is, you know, it's totally wrong, right? This is very much older. He says that they're certainly Pliocene or Miocene. And then Ribeiro, who's a geologist, he's not an anthropologist. He begins openly reporting that human implements were being found in Pliocene and Miocene formations in Portugal. But this is in 1866. So the question we would ask is, do they still think these are Pliocene and Miocene formations today?
Right. That's a question. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
My point is that just in the epistemological sense, when you're looking at these old studies, depending on what they're analyzing, you can say, well, is that really, I don't know what the word for it is, but how do you define a worked tool?
Yeah.
One guy tried to do it, right? He tried to come up with these,
the Barnes definitions. Yeah.
I don't see how it's, I guess I don't see how it's doable, but it could be done.
Yeah. I agree. I have trouble. I've looked at a lot of pictures of eoliths since starting this book report, and in some cases, I'm just like, I
have no idea how to recognize that.
Right.
I would never recognize that in the field.
Right. Well,
But-
one thing they do is they examine them with a lens, even
Yeah,
a
that's
magnifying
true, yeah.
glass. And so even if it's just a flint chip,
Yeah.
a flake that was probably made naturally. I mean, it could have been somebody whacked it and broke it off. But the edge is very sharp. But they analyze that edge and they see evidence of it being used as a tool.
Yeah,
it's,
right.
It's not microscopic, but it requires magnification to see.
Right.
So you'd have to walk around in the field with a freaking magnifying glass to tell. Like you'd have to look at that edge and be like, yep, somebody was using this to hack at bone.
Yeah, and so there could be telltale signs of that type of thing, but in some cases, there could be geological forces that are yet unknown
Yeah.
or undetectable in the sedimentary layers that it's found in or whatever layers it's found in.
Yeah.
That in the future we'll have technology to understand,
true.
these are the forces that were happening here and this is the way it moves or shifts. And so
Yeah.
this what was thought was worked could be, natural. So that, like, in that sense,
Yeah, like in one of these arguments, they brought up like that ice glaciers could be, and this is why all the flakes seem to go in one direction because the ice is grinding
right.
it against, right, and it's actually breaking flakes off, and it makes
the ice is a little soft and it's pushing against harder stones.
right, and so
flaking and all
the
this
flakes
thing.
are all in the same direction,
Yeah.
and that makes it look like human work, but it's totally not. That makes sense.
Yep.
But and a lot of times you're finding these things that there was never any ice there, so
Yeah.
or at least not any time where humans could have been around. Yeah. They're not old enough to have been made by ice. But yeah, I thought the ice thing, I was like, okay, I can see that. I can see how, a flint cobble that's up against, some harder rock and the ice is just grinding it along, it could end up being flaked in interesting ways. So, but, and yeah, I agree that
This is why you
future
want-
science could show that could further complicate the arguments about these eoliths. But now they're talking about paleoliths.
This is why it's good for people that are like, if that's a part of your, your expertise as an archaeologist, well, then start napping flint, like start working stone yourself. You have to get you got to get a better understanding of how it works and what the work looks like.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And there was a guy, I think they had, 7 ages.
You also need to cut bones.
That's
You need to become the world's expert.
Wear a butt flap while you're working on
cut
your
bones. Totally into cut bones.
We should go out. 7 Ages audio journal interviewed an archaeologist.
yeah.
I can't remember his name, but
Salutrian guy.
yeah,
He naps.
he's an expert, and he's like learned all this stuff about it. And so it's, I don't know, I just think that's important to have that.
Yeah, because that helps you recognize how they were made, and,
Right.
and then you can even recognize somebody whacked at it a couple of times and then discarded it. You're like,
Yeah,
they did
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So it's a way of bettering, your ability to analyze what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Without necessarily coming up with like a scientific like description of exactly, that anybody could follow, right? Here's what you follow to find out if it's man-made or not, which I just don't think.
Yeah.
Carl Halbert is the guy they interviewed. Thank you, Watcher.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. And I think more science needs to be done. And I think it still is. The question of what is a very crude tool is still hotly debated in some cases.
Yeah.
It's just not really, it's not sexy science. Like, you don't see it in the news, right?
Right.
In 1871, Ribeiro presented to the Portuguese Academy of Science at Lisbon a collection of flint and quartzite implements, including some gathered from the tertiary formations of the Tagus Valley. In 1872, at the International Congress of Prehistoric Anthropology and Archaeology meeting in Brussels, Ribeiro displayed more specimens, mostly pointed flakes, and scientific opinion was divided. At the Paris Exposition of 1878, Ribeiro displayed 95 specimens of tertiary flint tools. Gabriel De Mortier, the influential French anthropologist, visited Ribeiro's exhibit and declared that 22 of the specimens had undoubted signs of human work. So this is the sculptard, remember? The more I read about what, De Mortier was saying, I'm like, okay, he starts out super skirpy. But as time goes on, you kind of see like, well, he actually is like, okay, I see human workmanship in some of that. So he becomes less skirptard. Along with his friend and colleague, Emile Carteliac, De Mortier brought other scientists to see Ribeiro's specimens, and they were all of the same opinion.
Correction.
Oh.
James Adavasio is the name of the guy interviewed on
7 Ages.
7 Ages.
Okay. And they were all of the same opinion. A good many of these flints were definitely made by humans. De Mortier wrote, "The intentional work is very well established, not only by the general shape, which can be deceptive, but much more conclusively by the presence of clearly evident striking platforms and strongly developed bulbs of percussion. The bulbs of percussion also sometimes had, I don't know what that word is at all, Earliers? Small chips removed by force of impact. So the place where it was actually hit's got little, like a spatter. A pockmark. Some of Ribeiro's specimens also had several long vertical flakes removed in parallel, something not likely to occur in the course of random battering by the forces of nature. Leland W. Patterson, a modern expert on stone tools, holds that the bulb of percussion is the most important sign of intentional work on a flint flake. If the flake also shows the remnants of a striking platform, then one can be even more certain that one is confronted with a flake struck deliberately from a flint core and not a piece of naturally broken flint resembling a tool or weapon."
Yeah, so in other words, like pressure, flaking, and grinding produce very different flakes than percussion.
Yeah.
And so if you have regular percussion flaking along an edge, it's not like the rock fell and like magically hit every single one of those edges
Right. Yeah.
while it was tumbling down the side of a mountain or something.
Yeah. I mean, maybe once in a trillion times. I mean, you know.
Yeah, but then if you find a bunch
like,
of them in a small area, that's like, man, I wish I could make it
wow,
like
look at that arrowhead that just got made.
Yeah, what's the Boeing 747? What did they say?
Oh, like if a tornado goes through a junkyard and builds a Boeing 747. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It can happen
It could.
in the multiverse where everything is possible. Okay.
right.
Let's take a break.
All right. And we are back. I always say "and" for some reason.
I mean, I say
Times-
"and" at the very beginning
I
of the show. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen.
No "and." Anyway, final segment, man, already.
Yeah. Fastest 2 hours.
Time flies in the cube.
That's right. Fucking bell needs to be closer. Yeah, that'll work.
It's good to be back. You're supposed to mute it.
Am I? Fucking whack. Like that? Okay. Yeah, just put it on the keyboard, and when I hit it, I'll hit 5 keys.
Right.
Okay. So De Mortier further observes many of these specimens on the same side as the bulb of percussion have hollows with traces and fragments of sandstone adhering to them, a fact which establishes their original position in the strata. But some scientists were still doubtful. At the 1880 meeting of the International Congress of Prehistoric Anthropology and Archaeology held in Lisbon, Portugal, Ribeiro displayed more specimens from Miocene beds. In his report, he stated, 1. These were found as integral parts of the beds themselves. 2. They had sharp, well-preserved edges, showing that they had not been subject to transport for any great distance. And 3. They had a patina similar in color to the rocks in the strata of which they formed a part. I think that last one is important because they want to say, he says this. The second point is especially important. Some geologists claimed that the Pleistocene flint implements had been washed into fissures into Miocene beds by floods and torrents.
Yeah.
But if the flints had been subject to such transport, then the sharp edges would most probably have been damaged, and this was not the case. The Congress assigned a special commission to inspect the implements and the sites. On September 22nd in 1880, the commission members boarded a train and proceeded north from Lisbon. During the journey, they gazed at the old forts topping the hilltops and pointed out to each other the Jurassic, Cretaceous, and Tertiary terrains as they moved through the valley of the Tagus River. They stepped off the train at Carregado, and then they proceeded to nearby Ada, and 2 kilometers, or just over a mile from Ada, arrived at the hill of Monte Redondo. At that point, the scientists dispersed into various ravines in search of flints. In his book, Le Préhistorie, Gabriel De Mortier gave an informative account of the events that took place at Monte Redondo. The members of the Congress arrived at Ada in the middle of a great freshwater formation. It was the bottom of an ancient lake with sand and clay in the center, and sand and rock on the edges. It is on the shores that intelligent beings would have left their tools, and it is on the shores of the lake that once bathed Monte Redondo that the search was made. It was crowned with success. The investigator of Umbria, Mr. Bellucci, discovered in situ a flint bearing incontestable signs of intentional work. Before detaching it, he showed it to a number of his colleagues. The flint was strongly encased in the rock, and he had to use a hammer to extract it. It is definitely of the same age as the deposit. Instead of lying flat on a surface onto which it could have been secondarily re-cemented at a much later date, it was found firmly in place on the underside of a ledge extending over a region removed by erosion. It is impossible to desire a more complete demonstration attesting to a flint's position in the strata. Some modern authorities consider the Ada conglomerates to be early Miocene, which is 15 to 20 million years old. Altogether, there seems little reason why Ribeiro's discoveries should not be receiving some serious attention even today.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so to
Holy crap.
make this clear, the place where when they sent the investigators out there, one guy found a flint tool embedded in the strata, and it was on the ceiling of what was basically an overhang.
Right.
You know, they've got a little diagram in here showing where it was found, and it shows that there is a erosion cut in. So basically, you had to walk into,
what would have been an ancient shoreline, maybe.
Yeah.
Or no, this is more modern erosion than the lake.
Yeah, the modern erosion. Yeah.
Than the lake itself.
Right. Okay.
I like flip-flopping on my points here. If I go back
on your points?
on my points. No, yeah. Going back to again the idea of geological dating, right?
Yeah.
The layer dating. So it's given it's the Miocene, early 15 to 20 million years old, but are those dates right?
Yeah. Right.
It could be,
Yeah.
but
I mean, you'd have to dig into how they arrived at those dates for that.
it's probably incredibly complex.
Yeah. Right. And they're just using those numbers in the book as a reference.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't mean they're that old. It's just like when you find even crude tools in something that old, either like something about the story that we're being told about geological past and evolutionary past is wrong somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now we're going back to France, which means there's going to be a lot of names that I'm not going to say right. The finds of El Bourgeois at Thenay in France. On August 19th, 1867 in Paris, El Bourgeois presented to the International Congress for Prehistoric Anthropology and Archaeology a report On flint implements he had found in early Miocene beds at Thinay in north-central France. Bourgeois said they resembled the types of quaternary implements, scrapers, borers, and blades, etc., that he had found on the surface in the same region. He found on almost all of the Miocene specimens the standard indications of human work: fine retouching, symmetrical chipping, and traces of use. At the Paris Congress, only a few scientists admitted that they were actual artifacts. Undeterred, Bourgeois continued to find more specimens and convincing individual paleontologists and geologists that they were the result of intentional work. So Gabriel De Mortier was one of the first to be so convinced. Again, the sculptard shows up. This dude's everywhere. Some scientists questioned the stratigraphic position in which the flints had been found. The first specimens collected by Bourgeois came from rocky debris along the sides of a small valley cutting through the plateau at Thinay. Geologists such as Sir John Prestwich objected that these were essentially surface finds. In response, Bourgeois dug a trench in the valley and found flints showing the same signs of human work. Still unsatisfied, sculptards proposed that the flints found in the trench had come to their positions through fissures leading from the top of the plateau, where Pleistocene implements were often found. To meet this objection, Bourgeois in 1869 sank a pit into the top of the plateau. During the excavation, he came to a layer of limestone 1 foot thick with no fissures through which Pleistocene stone tools might have slipped to lower levels. And yet deeper in the pit, at a depth of 14 feet in early Miocene strata, Bourgeois discovered many flint tools. De Mortier stated, "There was no further doubt about their antiquity or their geological position."
Wow, that's cool.
Despite this clear demonstration, many scientists retained their unreasonable doubts. A showdown came in Brussels at the 1872 meeting of the International Congress of Prehistoric Anthropology and Archaeology. Bourgeois presented many specimens, figures of which were included in the published proceedings of the Congress. Describing a pointed implement, Bourgeois stated, "Here is an awl-like specimen on a broad base. The point in the middle has been obtained by regular retouching," and there is a little picture of this thing. "This is a type common to all epochs. On the opposite side is a bulb of percussion." And Bourgeois described another implement which he characterized as a knife or cutting tool. "The edges have regular retouching, and the opposite side presents a bulb of percussion." On many of his specimens, noted Bourgeois, the edges on the part of the tool that might be grasped by the hand remain unworn, while those on the cutting surfaces showed extensive wear and polishing. Another specimen was characterized by Bourgeois as a projectile point or an awl. He noted the presence of retouching on the edges, obviously intended to make a sharp point. He also saw among the objects he collected a core with the two extremities retouched with the aim of being utilized for some purpose. He observed, "The most prominent edge has been chipped down by a series of artificial blows, probably to prevent discomfort to the hand grasping the implement. The other edges remain sharp, which shows this flaking is not due to rolling action." And this is the picture of that one. That they worked on the hand end to make it some more blunt, but kept this edge sharp. Okay. In order to resolve any controversy, the Congress of Prehistoric Anthropology and Archaeology nominated a 15-member commission to judge the discoveries. A majority of 8 members voted that the flints were of human manufacture. Only 5 of the 15 found no trace of human work in the specimens, and 1 member expressed no opinion, and another supported Bourgeois with some reservations. Bulbs of percussion were rare on the early Miocene flints, but most of the flints displayed fine retouching of the edges. The retouching tended to be concentrated on just one side of an edge, while the other side remained untouched. This is called unifacial flaking. De Mortier, like modern authorities, believed that in almost all cases, unifacial flaking is not the result of chance impacts, but of deliberate work. In his book, De Mortier included reproductions of some flints that displayed very regular unifacial retouching. Some of the critics of Bourgeois commented that among all the early Miocene flint pieces that he collected, there were only a very few good specimens, about 30. But De Mortier stated even one incontestable specimen would be enough, but he has 30. Modern authorities on stone tools, such as L.W. Patterson, say that parallel flake scars of approximately the same size are good indications of human work. Illustrations of the flints from the early Miocene of Thenay show such flake scars. In figure 4.7, it shows a unifacial implement from Thenay along with a similar accepted unifacial implement from Olduvai Gorge. Many of the flints of Thenay have finely cracked surfaces, indicating exposure to fire. De Mortier concluded that humans had used fire to fracture large pieces, and the resulting flakes were then made into tools. Through the writings of S. Lang, knowledge of the Thenay tools from the early Miocene reached the intelligent reading public of the English-speaking countries. He stated, "The human origin of these implements has been greatly confirmed by the discovery that the Mincopics of the Andaman Islands manufacture whetstones or scrapers almost identical with those of Thenay, and by the same process of using fire to split the stones into the requisite size and shape. On the whole, the evidence for these Miocene implements seems to be very conclusive, and the objections to have hardly any other ground than the reluctance to admit a great antiquity for man." So who made the flint implements of Thenay? Some thought they had been made by primitive ape-like human ancestors. But in 1894, S. Lang said of the flints, "Their type continues, with no change except that of slight successive improvements, through the Pliocene, Quaternary, and even down to the present day. The scraper of the Eskimo and the Andaman Islanders is but an enlarged and improved edition of this Miocene scraper. If humans make such scrapers today, it is certainly possible that identical beings made similar scrapers back in the Miocene. And, as we shall see in the coming chapters, scientists did in fact uncover skeletal remains of human beings indistinguishable from Homo sapiens in the Tertiary." It thus becomes clearer why we no longer hear about these flints from Thenay. At one point in the history of paleoanthropology, several scientists who believed in evolution actually accepted the Thenay Miocene tools, but attributed them to a precursor of the human type. Evolutionary theory convinced them such a precursor existed, but no fossils had been found. When the expected fossils were found in 1891 in Java, they occurred in a formation now regarded as Middle Pleistocene. That certainly placed any supporters of Miocene ape men in a dilemma. The human precursor, the creature transitional between fossil apes and modern humans, had been found not in the early Miocene, 20 million years ago by current estimate, but in the Middle Pleistocene, less than 1 million years ago. Therefore, the flints of Thenay and all the other evidences for the existence of tertiary humans or tool-making tertiary ape men were quietly and apparently quite thoroughly removed from active consideration and then forgotten. Wow. The extensive evidence for the presence of tool-making hominids in the Tertiary was in fact buried, and the stability of the entire edifice of modern paleoanthropology depends upon it remaining buried. If even one single piece of evidence for the existence of toolmakers in the Miocene or early Pliocene were to be accepted, the whole picture of human evolution, built up so carefully in this century, would disintegrate. And that's why.
Yep.
I mean, that sounds kind of cliche, but is that really, that's why, right? Like these can't be accepted. I on the one hand, I'm like, well, why don't they just rebuild it? Why not just say, okay, let's rebuild the story. Here we have evidence that's much older. What's the big problem with that? Right?
I don't know. I don't understand it. I mean, I've heard a lot of the same old explanations. Oh, people wrote textbooks on this stuff and their whole career was based off of these theories and ideas that they're famous for, and they don't want to see that argument die, or they don't want to see their mentors reputation go down the dirt. Oh, he was wrong. It's like, I can see that, but so many scientists are not connected to any of that work.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. But
is it just could it just be that the idea that to announce you've accepted some find like this would destroy your career? That's the only reason why no one does it, right?
Definitely one.
Everyone thinks that if they say, okay, I agree with this, that their career is destroyed, so nobody does it. Even though that's probably true. But if everybody thinks that,
follow the money.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, these are the explanations we're given by those people who have stuck their necks out.
Yeah.
Well, they'll lose their funding. Funding is everything. Oof. I'm not good with this mute button. Funding is everything, right?
Yeah.
You've got a project. Well, if you say that, they're going to pull the funding.
Yeah.
So don't. If you report those findings in the paper, you're going to lose your funding.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then I won't have a job. And then no university is going to take me in. And,
yep.
you can't even get a teaching job or whatever. It's like,
yeah. It's like a peer pressure, basically.
Yeah. That's
I don't know.
know.
It seems like it could form a big commission and say, all right, let's look at all this evidence and let's rebuild the story based on the evidence if it looks like it's solid. Or at least say all right,
who's going to get funding to do that?
I know, but it doesn't seem like it's impossible. It just, why wouldn't the funding be there to do something like that? Get the story right rather than, just maintain it as it is wrong. I don't know.
I don't know. Get down to paleo, stop digging.
Yeah.
That's the way you deal with it.
Okay. In 1870, Anatole Rojo reported that geologist Charles Tardy had removed a flint knife from the exposed surface of a late Miocene conglomerate at Aurillac in southern France. To describe the removal, Rojo used the word arraché, which means the flint had to be extracted with some force. De Mortier believed Tardy's flint tool had only recently been cemented onto the surface of the late Miocene conglomerate and therefore chose to assign it a Pleistocene date. The French geologist J.B. Reims doubted that the object found by Tardy was actually of human manufacture, but in 1877 Reims made his own discoveries of flint implements in the same region. These implements were taken from sediments lying between layers of volcanic materials laid down in the late Miocene about 7 to 9 million years ago. In 1894, S. Lang gave a detailed description of the signs of human manufacture that Reims had discovered on the flints. The specimens consist of several well-known Paleolithic types: celts, scrapers, arrowheads, and flakes, only ruder and smaller than those of later periods. They were found at 3 different localities in the same stratum of gravel and comply with all the tests by which the genuineness of quaternary implements is ascertained, such as bulbs of percussion, conchoidal fractures, and above all, intentional chipping in a determinate direction. According to Lang, French anthropologist Armand de Quatrefages noted fine parallel scratches on the chipped edges of many specimens, indicating usage. These use marks were not present on other unchipped edges. The flint implements were accepted as genuine at a Congress of Scientists in France. Lang also said about the tools, the gravelly deposit in which they are found contains 5 different varieties of flints, and all of these, all that look like human implements are confined to one particular variety, which from its nature is peculiarly adapted for human use. As Quatrefages says, no torrents or other natural causes could have exercised such discrimination, which could only have been made by an intelligent being selecting the stones best adapted for his tools and weapons. So that's interesting. Like there's 5 different kinds of flints, but only one of them looks like is ever made into what looks like tools.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Max Verworn of the University of Göttingen in Germany was initially doubtful of reports of stone tools from the Pliocene and earlier. So in 1905, he went to conduct his own investigations of the stone tools found there. He remained for 6 days, making excavations at a site called Port de Boudio. I don't know how to say it. From not far from somewhere else. Describing the results of his first day's work, he wrote, "I had the luck to come upon a place where I found a great number of flint objects, whose indisputable implemental nature immediately staggered me. I had not expected this. Only slowly could I accustom myself to the thought that I had in my hand the tools of a human being that had lived in tertiary times. I raised all the objections of which I could think. I questioned the geological age of the site. I questioned the implemental nature of the specimens, until I reluctantly admitted that all possible objections were not sufficient to explain away the facts. The sharp-edged, chipped flint objects, apparently tools, were found in small groups among stones that were very much rolled and worn. This meant that the flint objects had not been subjected to much movement since their deposition, and that the flaking upon them was therefore of human rather than geological origin. The fact that the sharp-edged implemental flints were found in groups also suggested the presence of workshop sites. Verworn then discussed at length various ways to identify human work on a flint object. He divided evidence of such work into 3 groups. 1. Signs of percussion resulting from the primary blow that detached the flake from a flint core. 2. Signs of percussion resulting from secondary edge chipping on the flake itself. And 3. Signs of use on the working edges.
All right. I can follow that.
Yeah. What's the secondary edge chipping? That's the only question I have on that. Like, I get the signs of percussion resulting from the primary blow that detaches the flake. What's the signs of percussion resulting from secondary edge chipping?
So after you separate the flake, then you work the edge of the flake.
Oh, okay.
That's what I assumed anyway.
Okay. Considering all the various characteristics of percussion and use, Verworn suggested that none of them are in themselves conclusive. The critical analysis of a given combination of symptoms is the only thing that will put us in a position to make decisions, he stated. This is the same methodology suggested by L.W. Patterson, a modern expert on stone tools. Patterson does, however, give more weight than Verworn to bulbs of percussion and unidirectional flaking along single edges of flakes, especially when numerous specimens are found at a site. Patterson's studies showed that natural forces almost never produce these effects in significant quantities. Verworn then provided an example to illustrate how his method of analysis might be applied. Suppose I find in an interglacial stone bed a flint object that bears a clear bulb of percussion, but no other symptom of intentional work. In that case, I would be doubtful as to whether or not I had before me an object of human manufacture. But suppose I find there a flint which on one side shows all the typical signs of percussion, and which on the other side shows the negative impressions of 2, 3, 4, or more flakes removed by blows in the same direction. Furthermore, let us suppose one edge of the piece shows numerous successive parallel small flakes removed, all running in the same direction and all, without exception, are located on the same side of the edge. Let us suppose that all the other edges are sharp without a trace of impact or rolling. Then I can say with complete certainty it is an implement of human manufacture. So yeah, I think he's just...
This is good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that other guy was talking about. He was trying to decide what was human manufacture. But yeah, this, I think I can totally recognize those things in the field.
Yeah. And he's saying that you have to have more than one of them together.
Right.
Yeah. Because you might have a couple of chips on one edge that kind of looks maybe work, but if you don't have the other things, you're like, well, this is maybe not.
Yeah, I had actually pointed this out before too. It's like...
It's more than one thing.
You might find something that is questionable in terms of whether or not it's human made. But if you're standing on a mid mound, surrounded by other signs of work,
Yeah.
and then you find that piece, you could, you're like, yeah, they worked this,
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are plenty of questionable pieces you might find randomly where there's no other flint around.
Yeah, and you're like, look, it's a fish. Basically.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I like this. This is good. What?
Pause it. I
do you want me
gotta
to do?
blow my nose.
Oh God. Okay, we're back.
Yeah, much better. Much better. Sorry for all the sniffling. I should have just had you pause it before.
We're almost done.
I know. We're almost
You
done.
made it. I'm proud of you.
Made it. So just a few more things here. We're still with Verworn, the German guy who's conducting excavations in France. So after conducting a number of excavations at different sites, he analyzed many flint implements he found employing the rigorously scientific methodology described above. He then came to the following conclusion. With my own hands, I have personally extracted from the undisturbed strata many such unquestionable artifacts. That is, unshakable proof for the existence of a flint working being at the end of the Miocene. Most of the implements found by Verworn in the Miocene beds were scrapers of various kinds. Some scrapers, he wrote, show only use marks on the scraping edge, while the other edges on the same piece are quite sharp and unmarked. On other specimens, the scraping edge displays a number of chips intentionally removed in the same direction. This chipping displays quite clearly all the usual signs of percussion. Even today, the edges of the impact marks of previous blows on the upper part of some implements are perfectly sharp. The goal of the work on the edges is clearly and without doubt recognizable as the removal of cortex, or the giving of a definite form. So does he mean like thinning it out? Is that what he's talking about? Removal of cortex?
I don't know. Maybe the patina or the exterior.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But I don't know.
On many pieces, there are clearly visible hand grip areas fashioned by the removal of sharp edges and points from places where they would injure or interfere. About another object, Verworn said, the flake scars on the scraper blade lie so regularly next to each other in parallel fashion that one is reminded of Paleolithic or even Neolithic examples. So, like, the flakes are very regular and even along the edge. In the accepted sequence, Paleolithic and Neolithic tools are assigned to the later Pleistocene. And Verworn also found many pointed scrapers. Among all the flint objects, these show most clearly the intentional fashioning of definite tool shapes, at least in the area of the working edges. In fact, the points are generally made in such a way that one can speak of genuine care and attention in the technique. The edges have been worked by many unidirectional blows in such a way as to make the intention of fashioning a point unequivocal.
Yeah.
Also found were notched scrapers with rounded concave openings on the working edge, suitable for scraping cylindrical objects like bones or spear shafts. Verworn observed, in most cases, the notched scrapers are made by chipping out one of the edges in a curved shape by unidirectional blows. He also uncovered several tools adapted for hammering, hacking, and digging. Describing one such tool, Verworn wrote, a large pointed tool for chopping or digging. It is formed from a natural slab of flint by the working of a point. One sees on the surfaces of the piece the cortex of the flint, and at the top a point made from numerous flakes, mostly removed in the same direction.
Yeah, so the cortex would be that, what we typically call the patina, but
patina,
the
yeah,
cortex.
okay. About another pointed tool, Verworn stated, this tool has on the side directly below the point a hand grip made by removing the sharp cutting edges. It might have been a primitive hand axe used for hammering or chopping. And he also found tools he thought were adapted for stabbing, boring, and engraving. So he concludes, at the end of the Miocene, there was here a culture, which was, as we can see from its flint tools, not in the very beginning phases, but had already proceeded through a long period of development. This Miocene population knew how to flake and work flint. And he went on to say, the size of the implements points toward a being with a hand of the same size and shape as our own, and therefore a similar body. The existence of large scrapers and choppers that fill our own hands, and above all, the perfect adaptation to the hand found in almost all of the tools seems to verify this conclusion to the highest degree.
Wow. That's cool. All right, man.
And that's Miocene stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
middle Miocene, yeah.
5 to 23 million years.
Yeah, so he was saying late to middle Miocene for these tools. So we're looking around, 10 million years old in some
That's
cases.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's, I keep bringing this up, but none of this evidence is in modern literature about this stuff anymore.
No.
And are there good reasons for that? That's the question. Like, have these really been shown not to be what tools, or have they just ignored them? And they're able to keep ignoring them because it's old. He talks about how, like the Ribeiro guy, that dude's evidence, they had to track it down through multiple, first they're finding little hints, and then they're like, well, what? They follow the reference for that, and they find another place where somebody's like a brief sentence about it and just slams it. They follow that reference and they keep doing it until they come up with a bunch of papers from the late 1800s about this guy's finds. So, I mean, how many scientists now even know about these discoveries?
Yeah, probably not many.
Yeah.
Dang it. I want them to know. Or at least check it out. Try to verify it. Or,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the Watcher's pointing out that...
Just go back there and dig some more.
Yeah.
Get some modern examples.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Like looking through these old papers and...
Yeah, and say, all right, let's go check this site again.
Let's go dig through that foot of limestone, find a
Yeah.
place where it's not cracked, and let's see if we can find some
Yeah.
flint tools.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And the Watcher's pointing out that they had they had conferences.
Yeah.
Big conferences where a whole bunch of people looked at these things, and they would assign special commissions to say, like, are these actual tools? And in a lot of in the cases that they're bringing up, the commissions always decided they were tools.
Yeah, Watcher's also suggesting that they've built dams and flooded every one of those places.
Yeah, that's right. They're all under reservoirs now. Yeah, it's classic.
There's more. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it.
Yep.
Part 3, 10.
3 done.
How far are we in the book? Chapter 1?
No. Looks like we're just over 1/4 of the way through now.
Yeah, and there's...
I don't know how many references are in the back, or
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we did go.
This is going to be a 9-episode...
Yeah. We did get we got just to the end of everything I had marked, so that was
Okay,
perfect.
cool.
Yeah.
12 episodes for this one, folks.
Right. It's going to be. I'm reading a lot out of this. Still not everything, but a lot, especially out of these early sections with all the tools and stuff.
Yeah.
Because
Very cool stuff.
Yeah. Yep. All right. You guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Like we were saying earlier.
Bye, Watcher.
I haven't read any emails on the show recently, but I do read them all as they come in, and I am sorting them for being read on the show eventually. So keep on sending those emails. Website, brothersoftheserpent.com. That's where you can find everything related to the podcast, including the encyclopedia, the glossary, the snakeskins, which is our merchandise store.
Go to contact@thecabin.com if you want to go on the next Utah trip.
It's already being sold out, so sign up quick.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah.
April.
What is it, 370 days from now? Was that what it said?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Join the Pyramid Scheme through Patreon or PayPal. Do we have any Pyramid Scheme?
Dang it. Yes, we do, actually. We can do that on the bonus-ode, or the communication-sode.
Yeah, all right. That makes sense.
But yes, thank you all who've been donating, and I have seen your messages, and they will be read.
Okay. Shout out to the Facebook group.
What's up?
Yeah. Appreciate you guys are out there. Sorry we're not there, but we hate Facebook.
Troll Brenner.
That's right. Keep trolling Brenner. Tag him in everything. Blow up his phone. Thanks to Jeff, History Shift, Thomas at Pod Doodles, and Where Did the Road Go? And Uncharted X, Ben over at Uncharted X, Soraya from Where Did the Road Go? All of you people in the Discord, and all of you listeners out there, we love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.